And I think we're ready, and I'll introduce Chuck Benjamin from APPL to get us started.
Thank you, Rob. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Case for Support, the first of two fundraising webinars in a series of public lands partnership training with the National Environmental Education Foundation and the Association of Partners for Public Lands. Thanks so much for joining us today. As Rob said, I'm Chuck Benjamin. I'm the Education Coordinator for APPL, and I'll be co-moderating today's meeting. Before we get started, though, I'd like to go over a few logistics with regard to the meeting. First of all, because this is a web and audio conference, all of you should have called in on the telephone, accessing the drop-down menu on your screen, and logged in on your computer. If you're hearing me and not seeing the PowerPoint on your computer, you need to reference the invitation you received for login instructions and or go to the NEF website and get the login instructions there. And in order to reduce background noise, as Rob has mentioned, all participants were auto-muted before joining the call. If you have a question or comment during the session, please type it in the chat box on your screen. You'll be acknowledged through the chat box, and the presenters will verbally answer all chat questions at selected breaks during the session. Today's presenter is George Ivey, an author and independent fundraising consultant in the public lands arena. To start the session, however, I'd like to turn it over to Rob Hampton, Director of the Public Lands Program for the National Environmental Education Foundation, for a few words. Rob?
Hi, thanks. As Chuck mentioned, my name is Rob Hampton. I'm the Director of the Public Lands Program here at the National Environmental Education Foundation. Many of you are already aware of National Public Lands Day. However, with a significant contribution and support from NPLD sponsor Toyota, we want to take this program to the next level and make National Public Lands Day every day. Now, our current mission is to encourage more Americans to enjoy, protect, and maintain our public lands every day through public engagement, professional development, and partnerships. So this is the professional development aspect, but we also want to mention some of the plans that we have for the Public Lands Program in the future. Of course, we'll have National Public Lands Day. We want that to continue and thrive as we have, and having it being the largest single-day volunteer event for public lands. But we also, currently we have the Everyday Capacity Building grants. We just ended our first cycle. These are capacity building grants to help build organizational structure and capacity at public land friend organizations. We'll be having another grant cycle starting sometime in May, so please keep your eyes and ears posted for that information. We're currently in the process of awarding 20 $5,000 grants, and then down the road we want to be able to provide everyday event grants. So these grants will be $1,000 grants to friends organizations to be able to host events on their public lands that focus on recreation, service and volunteerism, and or environmental education. And then to build off of that, we'll be hosting on our website everyday event resources in those three key areas as well. And then what you're involved with right now is our capacity building resources, and of course this is a webinar. So down the road, again, we'll hopefully be offering more tools and resources that everybody on this call can benefit from. And just a little PR for our additional webinars. On April 11th, we'll be doing another webinar with APPL, developing a fundraising plan. And then as referenced earlier, in May through July, we'll be offering finance webinars with the expertise of PricewaterhouseCoopers. And somebody asked a question earlier, well, can I have access to these webinars later? Yes, we're going to host all of the webinars online so you can view at your leisure, and then we'll have a resources component, which we have for this webinar as well, at the publiclandsday.org webinar page. So thank you very much for the time, and I'll hand it back over to George right now to get started.
Okay,
go ahead,
thanks,
George,
Rob.
while I hand the ball back over to you.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, excellent. So I've got the controls now. Okay, welcome everybody to today's webinar, which is about the case for support, which may sound like a part of a legal proceeding, but is actually, I think and hope, more interesting than that. So what is a case statement? I don't know that there's any official definition, but the one I'll offer here is that it's a concise, compelling, and inspirational pitch, either for your overall cause or for a particular project or program. You may also hear the term case for support either during this call or at other times. It's really the same thing, case statement or case for support. So we want to talk briefly about some of the uses of a case statement. Again, they can be very general things for your overall organization, and that might be basically the text that you use for your website, for your brochures, for presentations you do to Rotary clubs, for information booths when you're talking with just random folks who walk up and want to learn more. Sort of your basic case for support. Why should they be interested and why should they support you? The next category is specific fundraising projects or programs, and that can be at both the implementation phase and as well as in the planning phase. So you may be looking at a capital campaign, for instance, for a environmental education center, and you develop a case for support to use to approach your best donors to test whether they find the case compelling enough, see if they want to give money. And maybe at that early phase, you're thinking, hey, this is going to be a $5 million project with 4 buildings, and then perhaps because of financial issues or other concerns, it looks like you need to be a little more modest in your approach, and so that case statement may morph into a $3 million 2-building project later on. So you can use a case statement both in that planning phase and in the implementation phase of your projects. And then finally, I'd also say that you can use a case statement for volunteer programs. When you look around on the web, I think most people think of case statements just as something for raising money, but I'm a big proponent of valuing the time of your volunteers just as much as you value monetary gifts. And if you aren't familiar with a group called Independent Sector, I'd encourage you to get to know them. They are sort of the official counters of the value of volunteer time across the country, and they come up with a figure each year. They don't yet have the figures for 2011, but for 2010 they valued volunteer time at $21.36 an hour, and I'm sure some of your groups have hundreds or thousands of hours of volunteer time, and that really does add up. So I'd definitely say when you're thinking about volunteers, think about doing a case for support as well. So I also want to talk a little bit about the context of case statements, just sort of some big picture concepts before we get into the nitty-gritty of it. And there's 2 visuals in here in the pyramid and the elevator, which I'll explain in just a second. First of all, I think you should put together a case statement before you ask for the first dollar or the first hour of time. Make sure you really have it down, sort of why people should be supporting you. And the 2 concepts here are the pyramid and the elevator. The first is the pyramid, and something that is discussed much more during capital campaigns but is relevant, I think, to just about all fundraising is something called the gift pyramid, where, in essence, on most anything you do, whether it's for your whole organization or just a particular project you may have, you're going to get a lot of little contributions at the base, sort of your broad base of support, and then you're going to have a few very large gifts at the top. And overall, it'll vary from project to project, but for financial projects, you may get 50 to 80% of your money from only 20% of the donors or less. sort of the 80-20 rule that applies to so much of our work and so many different things. So you just have to sort of always keep in mind that you're going to get most of your money from a small number of people. And those small number of people get a lot of proposals from a lot of people. So you really have to create something that's really compelling to those folks, because there's just a lot of demand for their attention. There's even more demand for their money. So just keep in mind that top of the pyramid, the big gifts, the people with the most resources. Second issue here is the elevator speech, the basic idea of being able to state your case in the time it takes you to go from the top to the bottom in an elevator with whoever's on the elevator with you. A case statement can be a little longer than that, but especially today with so many information distractions, we really have to find ways to make our case in the shortest amount of time or space possible. And so just keep those two concepts in mind going forward. Make it a compelling case and make it very short. So the primary goals of a case statement. First of all, you want to educate your donor prospect. In some cases, your donors may be people that know you already, but in most cases, the donors probably don't know you, and you need to let them know who you are and what you do. You also want to create a sense of urgency, and that sense of urgency is probably going to be very different from case to case. Just as an example, I've been involved in fundraising for a livestock center, which is probably not something most people are doing who are on this call today, but we really needed to get some local support for the project, and it didn't really matter how much money they gave. We just had to show local support because most of the money was coming from outside the region, but the donors wanted to see...
I should have done it. Should I go find out for Robart?
Pardon? I think we've got interference here.
Yes.
What's
my other one?
I don't...
Lois? All right, I fixed that, George. Sorry about that.
Sorry about that. That's okay. So the urgency there with the local people is to say, hey, we've got to have some show of local support before these outside funders will come in. They need to know that local people are behind this project. And that was how we created that sense of urgency with the local people, and then it was a slightly different argument with those outside funders, those funders from outside the region. So that's just one example of that, creating that sense of urgency. You also want to create a lasting impression. That may be a really compelling story of one of your volunteers or some child who experienced some education programs and really turned around his or her efforts in school, something like that, something that really sticks with the reader. And then last but not least, you want to encourage the gifts. It's all about that. Just if you just inform people and never actually ask for anything, you aren't quite finishing the job on the case statement. So the content of case statements. Most of this doesn't have to be exactly in this order other than having the opening at the opening. But all of these components should be in pretty much any case statement that you write. And the first is a strong and compelling opening. You really want to grab the reader's attention very quickly in the process. And I'd say a good example of that is raising money for defibrillators in one of the national parks. The park wanted to have more rangers with portable defibrillators, which in itself doesn't sound terribly exciting, but we did some research and found that they had actually used a defibrillator to save someone's life. So when you're able to then open that case statement to say, thanks to this device, Mike Smith is alive today, and have a picture of him, that's far more compelling and far more intriguing than just saying, hey, the Rangers need some more defibrillators. Now, not every project is going to allow you to save a life, but I'd say if you got that material, definitely use it. Then, have your mission statement somewhere in that case statement. Some mission statements are kind of long, or they can be kind of awkward to kind of throw in there. I'd, feel free to sort of shorten it or just get it to the essence, but make sure your mission statement is somewhere in there. Put in your track record, your history. Let the donors know that you get results, that you're efficient, that you do a good job. They want to know that if they give you money, that you're going to do something good with it. At the same time, you need to show that you haven't accomplished everything. There's still a problem out there. There's still a need. And, you need to specify what that need is, provide some statistics, whatever that may be. And then show your strategies for solving that problem. Make it clear that you know what you're doing and that you have a good approach to it. Then you also want to talk about how the donor can help and why they would want to help. As much as you can, appeal to donor self-interest at this point. It's obvious, what the donor can do for you, but you also need to think through what are you doing for the donor, how are you helping the donor. A quick example on that would be for an emergency services training facility that I'm working on for a local county. When you have these training facilities in place for fire and police and emergency medical, that can improve insurance ratings for an entire county, which reduces insurance premiums for pretty much anyone paying insurance in the county. And so that's where you can show people, hey, you ante up and help us create this facility, you're going to get lower insurance premiums in the long run. So that's just a clear example of showing how the donor is helping the project, but then the project is later helping the donor. The call to action, this would usually be, a request for funds, maybe a request for volunteer time, something like that. But definitely, make sure there is some specific request for people to do something. And then last but not least, a small thing, I would include some contact information. That could be your website address. It could be a phone number, something so that it's easy for them to find more information or get in touch with you. If you're focusing on that top of the pyramid, those high-dollar donors, I would also recommend including the direct line of your executive director or your board chair or your campaign chair, something like that, so that those top donors have access to the people making the big decisions for the organization. Okay, so format. I may start with the second point there. There's no standard format. But that said, going back to the first one, I'd include some standard elements in all of your fundraising pieces. That may be your logo. It may be a consistent font size, a few sort of common elements so that when people see this information, whether it's a brochure, a little enclosure with a letter, whatever it is, they can instantly recognize that this is your organization. And so it's good to have some common elements like that. But that said, there's a lot of flexibility in terms of length, the number of sections, the number of headlines, photos, things like that. So there's some flexibility for you there. And the third point there with the length, I would definitely encourage you to keep it as short as you can. Today with Facebook and Twitter, Twitter you have to get down to 140 characters. People are looking at stuff much more quickly, much faster, and so you really have to keep these case statements as short as possible. You may have, if it's a huge capital campaign, you may have to look at a larger case statement or one overall case statement and then some specific pieces for different elements of a capital campaign, because it may be, let's say you have a $5 million project, you may have a little too much to put in there, and so you may need to just sort of break it down into some smaller digestible pieces in that way. But, if you have a project that's only $5,000, $10,000, look at it 2 pages, even 1 page. Be able to get it down to a very short summary as quick as you can. I'm a big advocate of using pictures. Even though I'm a writer, I know that, pictures can tell a story much better than anything else. You have a kid with that aha moment during an environmental education program. That's going to speak more to a donor than, any words that I can come up with. And then last point here, especially today with websites, the cheapness of producing DVDs, YouTube, everything else, consider doing a video version of your case statement and posting that on your website, putting it on YouTube, mailing it out to your top donors. There's a few different ways you can really engage donors, and video can be a great way to do that.
Hey, George. Hey, this is Rob. I think we had that poll that we wanted to open up.
We did. This is a good time to take a break.
And, yeah, let's just open up that poll while you move into writing style. But the question is, why do you want to write a case statement? And I'll just let George continue on while everybody's filling out that poll.
Yeah, thank you.
Yep.
So, yeah, we definitely want to get a sense of what you all are trying to raise money for so we can bring up some good examples that are most relevant to the people on the call. So writing style, this is something that cannot be, can't necessarily teach good writing during a short webinar, but some basic concepts here. Bad writing can kill a good idea. If something is presented with a lot of technical information, too many facts and figures, you can really take the life out of a project and make it seem like the most boring or bureaucratic project in the world. I'd say good writing will not guarantee support, but it can definitely help you. And then, I'm not sure if the 50-50 split here is exactly right, but the idea of having half of the content sort of inspiring content, half of it information, statistics, facts and figures, probably, at least a good goal to make sure that you are, really motivating the donor, whether you're trying to secure, a cash contribution, donation for a fundraising auction, or volunteer time. Make sure that you're really inspiring them, not just simply laying out a bunch of facts and a very logical argument. Again, capture interest in the first few sentences. Talk about the defibrillator saving someone's life, or whatever it may be. Make sure you get everyone's attention. Be concise. Shouldn't really say anything more than that on a point like that. Use action verbs, action voice. Definitely, you need to know your audience. A group of potential volunteers will be looking for different information than a group of CEOs and business folks. And then I guess sort of the final point here is, most of you will probably have a sense whether you're a good writer or not, and, as necessary, seek a good writer. That could be a volunteer. It could be someone on your staff. As necessary, there's plenty of writers out there that you can hire. For a small project, it's probably not worth it to pay someone to write up a case statement, but for a larger project, I would definitely consider that. And just a quick online example, there's a lot of good things in writing, but the best way for us to share stuff during a webinar is to refer you to some things online. But check out the Friends of Acadia website, which is friendsofacadia.org. On their About page, I just think it's a really well-written, concise text, positive messaging, action verbs in the bullet points. Just a good example of just good writing style and content, keeping it short. So, Rob, I don't know if you have those survey results.
Yep.
Okay.
I sure do. Thanks for everybody that responded. First of all, we have 155 people on this webinar, so thank you all for joining us. The biggest need or want, it looks like, is general support with 34%, and followed up by environmental education programs with 23%, and then other and buildings at, land and conservation programs at 16%. So it looks like it's general support and then everything else down the pipe there. Okay,
great. Good diversity there, and we'll try to speak to some of those issues as we go forward and give you some other pointers and ideas for doing that. And great that we have such a good crowd on the line.
George, can you re-mention the Friends of Acadia website?
Sure. It's friendsofacadia.org. So the word friends, the word O-V-O-F for of, and Acadia, which is A-C-A-D-I-A. So friendsofacadia.org. There's just, I think it's just an about tab on their website. You'll see that it's very short text, and it links to other text. But I just think it's a great.
I found it online, and I'll link it into the chat dialog box for our friends.
Okay, perfect. And I'd say just generally, as you're doing this and looking at stuff, whether you're doing something for general support or environmental education, look to see what other groups have done. Pick up their brochures, and there's no sense reinventing the wheel. There's a lot of good stuff out there, and environmental education tends to be the same general need and effort, whether you're in South Dakota or California. So it's good to see what's already out there rather than reinvent the wheel. So a few more best practices for case statements. I'd say keep it positive. There's a lot of temptation, especially raising money for public lands, to blame Congress or the president for the lack of money and the lack of staffing and buildings falling apart, things like that. I tend to think that you'll do a lot better by focusing on what you are doing rather than what other people are not doing. So just try as much as you can to keep your messaging positive. It's okay to acknowledge a problem, that science scores are really low or something like that, but then turn it around really quick and talk about what you're doing to solve the problem. Don't focus on the problem. Again, somewhat similar point, but avoid too much text about philosophy or politics, and just get right into what you're doing about it. In survey after survey, donors respond to an organization getting results, and that will speak louder than any philosophical argument. Definitely have your public land partner look at the drafts of this content, make sure that they're okay with it and that it's accurate, and so that they feel good about it, and they will often have good ideas to put in there or good aspects. They've maybe been doing the environmental education programs, and they can suggest a good quotation from a teacher who's been in a program, something like that. You can adapt the case statement. Once you have the case statement, it can become text for your website. It can become a brochure. It can then become, in smaller pieces, something you post on your Facebook page for your organization. And finally, little pieces of it, 140 characters at a time, can become tweets on Twitter. So look for opportunities to move the case statement into other formats. Make it into talking points for volunteers for information booths. A lot of groups get volunteers to help out, and the volunteers aren't really sure what to say. Give them these case statements and a few key talking points for when they're talking to random visitors to your information booth. Know your competition. This kind of cuts two different ways. A lot of funders want to see cooperation. So if you're doing environmental education programs, talk about your partnership with the local school system, or another group that's doing environmental education. Show that you're aware of what other people are doing, that you're not duplicating efforts, that you're really coordinating efforts. On the other hand, sometimes you do need to set yourself apart from the competition. One example I can offer on that may seem a little different, but in fundraising for a hospice facility in North Carolina, there are hospice facilities going up all over the state, all over the country. Great organizations. I think they do great work. But then how do you separate your hospice project, or it could be your environmental education project, from others? What we did is the particular hospice that I was working with had done a pretty groundbreaking effort on bereavement care, completely changing the approach to bereavement care and getting just outstanding results. So that was something to really feature, so that when we approach regional or national donors, we could say, hey, look, we are leaders in the field. We do things differently. We're trying to make things better. We're worth paying attention to, and we're worth investing in. So again, sometimes you want to be working with your competition, and sometimes you need to differentiate yourself. And I'm not sure that there's any hard and fast rule of when to choose which approach, but just something to keep in mind. So here is the big irony of the whole webinar. A case statement will not raise you money. The case statement states the case. It indicates a need for support, but the case statement by itself is not going to raise any money, especially when you're going to those big donors. You need to have someone making that request in person, preferably, in the same room as necessary by phone. Those big gifts really need that personal touch. People give to people. They don't give to stuff on paper. So you really need to view the case statement as something that is supporting you, that's complementing all of your fundraising efforts, but you still have to have that person asking for the major gift. You need that Donate Now button on your website. You need the giving form, that's with your brochure. So it's always that case statement is leading people to something else. It's complementing those actual efforts to actually ask for the money, because the case statement will necessarily be general, and you need to give an opportunity through those other means, through a person, through the online form, to individualize the request. So I hope that makes sense. It may create a little bit of confusion, but especially for the big gifts, just don't rely on mailing out a case statement and expecting $100,000 to come in. There's got to be a lot of work ahead of time, get to know the donor, establish a relationship, and move forward. And then the case statement will then back everything up and make it all work. But it's not a substitute for that personal interaction. So we're going to take a little pause here and check on questions from the audience.
Well, George, as of right now, we don't have any specific questions, but I'd like to remind everyone out there that if you do have any points you'd like clarified or other best practices that you might want to share, feel free to type things in the chat box, and we will have another question slide coming up here shortly, and we'd be happy to address those then. So, George, you're free to continue on.
Okay. And one more thing before George goes on. There's a question coming up in a future slide, and I just posted it on the chat dialog box. So if you want to chime in, I already 3 or 4 people have, and we'll get to those later. But why should someone volunteer for your group?
Yeah, because we definitely want to talk up volunteer programs. One question I just want to throw in there that often comes up, that if you're a really new organization, you don't have a track record of much to speak of, how can you convince people to support you? What I do in that case is look for similar organizations and offer that up as an example. Or if your staff have done great things at other places, or your board chair has done great things at other places, show that there's some track record for similar organizations or for the people in your organization. I'm on a board for a community foundation, and local Habitat for Humanity wanted to create a store to resell couches and other home furnishings as a way to raise money. They had absolutely zero experience with merchandising, but they were able to show that this model worked for other Habitat programs across the country, which showed that they had done the research, and it also showed that the model worked. And so they got the grant. They're doing great. So that's just one way to kind of get around that issue of not having a track record yet. And then, once you start and you build your own track record, you can have your own examples.
Hey, George, we just got quite a few questions, and I'm going to try to filter these over to Chuck for the later ones. But you mind answering a few questions right now?
Go for it.
Okay. Can you give another example of creating a sense of urgency?
Sometimes there can be a deadline. If there is, if someone offers matching funds, it's great to work with that donor to even though it may be an artificial deadline, to say, okay, every new or increased gift received by December 31st will be doubled. That's one example. So sometimes there's some urgency related to that a program has to start, to be ready for the new school year. Otherwise it's going to be delayed a full year. I think that's a very legitimate argument to make on environmental education, that you need the time to have it ready to go in the summer or in the fall, whatever the case may be. So there's some time deadlines I think always work well for that sense of urgency. The other possibility is just finding a good statistic that shows that the people you're serving, your clients, your park, whoever it is, show where the stats are, show that things are, people are falling behind, the science education stats. There's the nation's report card. There's very alarming data and all of that for pretty much any state in the union. You can sort of use that to show that this is a key issue, a key problem that you need to address quickly. But, I tend to think that whenever you can introduce a time deadline, that creates the most urgency.
Okay. And then I've got a good question. What do you think about short, one-paragraph case expressions, in quotation marks, excerpted from case statements? And it says this might be the soundbite.
Yeah, again, really with, the way people are getting so much information through Facebook and Twitter, it's great to be able to say stuff really quickly. If you look at a website, that's, it's pretty much how things are. There's a very short paragraph and then a link if you want to learn more. And it's somewhat a fun challenge for a writer to figure out how can you say something compelling in 2 sentences, and then give people the option to learn more. I think eventually, though, that case expression will still have to link to a longer statement, a little more information before you're going to get someone to consider a 4 or 5 or 6 figure gift. But it's a great way to sort of serve as a stepping stone to that bigger piece.
Okay, we'll do 2 more questions and then we'll try to get the rest later. But what is the best way to gain initial startup or administrative cost support? Maybe a bigger question here.
Yeah, well, I'll be honest, that's one of the toughest things for any organization and any business is the operations and sort of the annual costs. It's always easy to get money to start things up. It's hard to sustain them. Again, I think if you can, as much as you can show results and say, but it's the people, in our office that make these results possible. It's having a building. It's having the lights on. We can't do it without it, without that, that background support, operational support. And, to some degree you can, with some grants you can, put 10 to 20% of a grant proposal in, as administrative fees and things like that, depending on the funder. A lot of them, though, won't. They refuse to fund the organizational costs, which is unrealistic on their part. But I don't think, you can't really just approach them and say, "Hey, it's unrealistic to think we can do this without having back office support." So, I'm not sure that I have a magical solution. It's something that just everyone really struggles with. But as long as I think as long as you can say, this is how it all happens. This is, you could even use sort of that base of the pyramid sort of thing, the cornerstone that, without that strong central office function, you can't do all the other stuff. And so, don't necessarily ask for. Sorry, don't necessarily just ask for the administrative support. Say, we need the administrative support in order to do all this other stuff. And so you're keeping the focus still on the end product rather than just the office function, sort of show that it's a means to the end.
Excellent. All right, so we've got about a dozen or so here questions, and what I'll do is I'll just copy all of them. It'll be impossible to get them all in this webinar. And then we can maybe answer a few questions at the end, and we'll try to get these questions answered and posted up in the webinar resource section of our website.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, George.
Sure. Thank you. So let's go through a couple of other things. Just want to give you a few sort of more specific examples. The general case for support sounds like most of you, or a lot of you on the call, are looking to do a general case for support. And so this is sort of, this slide can kind of help walk you through it. That introductory text, the mission statement, statistics showing the need or impact, samples of your work so far, testimonials. If you have a client, whether that's a teacher, a student, a parent, the park superintendent, the National Forest Supervisor, whoever it is, get some quotations in there, either within the text or as a little offset on how great you are or how great a certain project is. That's always great to have a third-party testimonial to support you, to show that you're not just big on yourself, but that other people are. And then there's some certain opinion leaders. Maybe elected officials can be difficult because that can set people off if they're a different party. But there's certain people who could be a news anchor, someone like that, who has a big following, a big name recognition. If you can get someone like that to back you up, then that's always a great thing to have. Or even have them narrate. If you do an audio version or a video version, have that opinion leader, that well-known personality out there. Again, the statistics on the continuing need. I've seen a lot of things where people have said, "Hey, we've done all this great stuff, and keep supporting us," without any clear message of what that new support would do. So go ahead and spell that out a little bit and let people know what it is that you still need to do. Again, let the reader or the viewer know how they can help. Do you want them to volunteer? Do you want them to go hit that donate now button? Do you want them to talk things up to other donors? What do you want them to do? Let them know how they can help and why they want to help. Again, the pictures and video can complement all of that stuff on the page. So volunteer programs, which are key to a lot of the stuff. Just a few specific ideas to that. Show those photos, those testimonials of volunteers doing work. Still we have to have that mission statement in there. Give examples of volunteer projects you've already done. Get those statistics out there, the number of volunteers, the number of hours they've worked, the value of that time. Again, independent sector has that figure that you can use. And talk up the benefits to the volunteer, and that was what Rob mentioned in that chat, sort of why does someone want to volunteer for your group, and we want to hear from all of you on sort of what you think would motivate a volunteer. The key thing with volunteers, ask for time, not money. It's tempting. You think, oh, well, they're already giving us time. Maybe they'd also write a check for $100, $1,000, whatever it is. I would say just focus on the fact that they're giving you time and thank them for that. Volunteers eventually are your best prospects for planned gifts, bequests, and things like that. But I'd really just focus on the time and be thankful for that, and the money may follow. But I tend to be reluctant to double dip with your volunteers. Again, have a volunteer narrate the video version. Show that the volunteers are there. So, Rob, I don't know if you've gotten any answers back on the why should someone volunteer for your group question? Rob, are you there? Okay. Not hearing Rob.
Yeah, I'm not sure exactly what happened. He,
Sorry, I was on mute. Sorry about that.
Okay. Oh, that's okay.
Yes, they're all embedded here with all these questions. So let me read. So one says that their light station association they have an active volunteer program, but they need capital funds for restoration. Another person comments, because their volunteers work hard and have fun and eat yummy food.
Great.
So you got to take care of the volunteers.
Yes, definitely.
Recover, maintain conditions of their public land. It's all about taking care of your land and your volunteers here.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and the point here is, again, think through in these case statements, what is the motivation for the donor? Why does the volunteer want to help? I see a lot of stuff where it's like, hey, here's how the volunteer can help us. Here's how you can help us. But talk up sort of, how volunteering is good for them, and those are all great ideas there. A lot of people also love the social aspects of that. They've retired from other places. They've relocated to Arizona or Florida especially. They don't know people, and volunteering becomes a great social outlet. So talk that up. Just state clearly that you value people's time as much as their money. I think that's just great for people to hear, because I think a lot of people can read those annual reports where only people giving $1,000 or more are praised, and it kind of sends a negative message to volunteers or people with less money. So just acknowledge that you value their time. Talk about exercise, the working outside. That's great. So there's a lot of good ways to motivate your volunteers there. So I think that's good information. One other thing, and maybe Rob can post this as well, another great example of a case for support that's out there, the Golden Gate Conservancy that covers a lot of San Francisco area parks. Their website is parksconservancy.org, so parks, plural, conservancy.org. Their page on their Crissy Field Center, Crissy I think is CRISSY, is just a great page. Great text and photos. There's a report on their first 10 years that you can log on to. There's video clips, clear call to action, and how you can support them. Just another great example. I think most friends groups around the country that know of Golden Gate Conservancy aspire to be as great as they are, and that's another just great example out there that you all can look up. So you've already done that volunteering for the group slide. So environmental programs, I know we're getting close to the end of the call, so I may skim through this pretty quick. Environmental issues. Overall, Americans give only 2% of their money to environmental causes. That's a pretty narrow piece of the pie that we have to go for when we're trying to, buy land or do environmental education, things like that. So as much as you can, broaden the appeal beyond just the environment. A few things that in the Smokies we've done on environmental education to make it compelling to anyone from bankers to drug companies is talking about how we're helping meet state curriculum standards, that this isn't just some left-wing tree-hugging agenda, but we're actually helping address the state's curriculum standards, which teachers are struggling with due to state budget cuts. Science is the background of those environmental issues, and that's really compelling to a lot of folks especially in the drug industry. But there's others as well. So think through the companies around you that value science and need people who are good critical thinkers, who are where there's a big research and development arm of a business. And then the key issue that we really focus on is this inquiry-based learning, and that's sort of the essence of science. But when you really think about it, that effort to ask critical questions, collect data, and analyze it, and make decisions, that is the essence of doing business just about wherever you are. And so you can call it the scientific method, but you can also broaden it to call it inquiry-based learning. And I think just about any businessman or woman can understand that concept and how it's valuable and how they want to have people growing up who understand how to make critical decisions. So those are just a few ideas on how you can broaden the base of possible supporters on environmental projects. Another example would be on sort of talking up tourism. I mean, all of these parks, all these public lands are great for tourism. Tourism's great for business. So a local motel operator may only care about heads and beds and not, care about whether there's some rare bird nearby. But those are very compatible issues. Birders bring in money. They need a place to stay. So the fact that you've got great, environmental resources there becomes a great economic argument as well. So just, again, as you're going through all of this, just keep thinking through how can you motivate the donor? What can you do for them, not just what can they do for you? I think we have a little bit more time for a little more Q&A if we have.
Yeah, what I think I'm going to do is I'm just going through all these questions, and there seems to be some themes. Well, here's one specific question, but what I'll do is we're going to group some of these questions together, and then again we'll put it up on the resources page so you can see the questions and answers. But here are a couple. How important is swag to the donors? In other words, if you give this much, you get a water bottle. If you give this much, you get a coffee table book, etc. Do people do that today, or do they feel like that this is not the best use of money donated?
Well, a lot of that still happens. Most of the organizations I see make it at least optional so that someone doesn't want that. They can say, don't send me this, or they can opt in and say, for a gift of $100, you can get this, check, yes, I want it, or no, keep it and put the money to good use. So it's good to have that option so that people aren't just automatically getting stuff. I've tended to see that over time, the people who are most motivated by your tote bags and things like that, as soon as you stop offering the swag, they stop giving. Overall, and there's just such work entailed in fulfillment of getting that stuff, packaging it, mailing it. It's usually some awkward piece that requires a different box, and so you're eating up a lot of staff time as well. And so probably by the time you get it out the door for those small gifts, you've lost all your money that you're getting. So I tend to discourage it. But I think it has a place, especially if it has your logo on it, on a hat, something like that becomes good advertising. Or just as a way to reward your best donors, you can, sometimes just send them a little something as a thank you. But I would just view it with caution.
What do you think about sending out letters signed by hand? Should the envelopes be handwritten to increase the open rate?
Yes. If you've got the volunteers or the mailing size is small enough, I would definitely hand address things. Definitely put a sticky stamp on the front, not metered mail. The response rate for stamped mail is significantly higher than metered mail. There's little things like that. Probably the most practical thing once you have a large donor base is perhaps, set your cutoff at some point, but say if you're doing a big mailing on something, donors of less than $250, get, an automated, printed signature, and the high dollar donors, the executive director writes, signs it personally and adds a little note. To me, that's the best way to sort of focus your time and resources on that top of the pyramid.
Great. And we continue getting basic logistical questions about this webinar, but one question is any good resources for the beginner? And George and APPL put together a list of resources that you can use. Those are on the webinar section of publiclandsday.org. and then we have them specifically under the Case for Support webinar. And those resources include writing a case statement, what is a case statement, elements of winning a case statement, and some other worksheets. So please log on there. And then other logistical questions, this will be available as a PDF on our website. We're going to try to get it up tomorrow. And all additional questions we'll be copying and putting up on that same resources page. And we hope to get all those questions answered. Probably not by tomorrow, but as they come in, we'll be Facebooking and tweeting all of them and emailing reminders that they're up.
So that's we're going to cap the questions right there, Rob, I would presume?
Yep.
Okay, well, I'd like to take the opportunity then to thank George for a great session. I think we had some great information coming in, and for his follow-up act, join us again on April 11th for developing a fundraising plan. Special thanks to all of you today for joining us. I hope you gained some valuable information also, and I'll give it back to Rob to wrap up.
Yeah, so if anybody needs anything answered after this or needs a copy of this presentation and can't find it, email me here at rhampton@nefusa.org, and we'll take care of you. We're your friends here. We want to help you out. And as Chuck mentioned, our next webinar will be developing a fundraising plan. That'll be at the same time, 2 p.m. Eastern Time, April 11th. And please don't forget to fill out the SurveyMonkey. I'll put it back in the chat box so you could all click on it and fill it out. And I'll do that right now. But thank you very much for logging in. We had a great participation and a great time with you guys. Sorry that took a second. There's the webinar, or the survey.